hear about this, all right? Y'all got an email? You got an email?
So there is a,
Yeah, I did get that, yes, I
yeah,
did.
so there is a motion to add an action item 3B, which is to discuss the 50-cent fare implementation. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is all in favor of adding that item?
Aye.
Say
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. All right, so we're going to add item 3B, which is what we're going to discuss at this point. The implementation of a 50-cent fare on Monday to the Sunrunner headed westbound. I will turn it over to Commissioner Cox to lead the,
Well,
uh,
if you could explain, Mr. Miller, again, it doesn't have to be as lengthy as we did it before. Or maybe it should be as lengthy, but explain for those other, the commissioners that are present now, what we have going on with the beach right now. And,
Okay,
the email we all received, thank you.
thank you. Good morning. So, those of you who were at the PSA board meeting last week, or 2 weeks ago, remember that there were some citizens that came from St. Pete Beach that were claiming that the introduction of Sunrunner to take people to the beach had increased crime in St. Pete Beach. And they were insistent upon implementing a fare to reduce the number of, or in maybe their mind, folks that were committing these so-called crimes coming on the Sunrunner. And at the same time, I had spoken to the Pinellas County Sheriff about this. He was also in favor of charging a fare. The city of St. Pete Beach does not have its own police department. They contract with the sheriff. The sheriff provides the police, the services in St. Pete Beach. So he had, on his own, decided to put a group of sheriff deputies down there in St. Pete Beach at the citizens' request to handle the issues that, and he said that his sheriffs have been reporting to him that he knew that it was an issue with homeless riding the Sunrunner to get out of the heat and charge their, to go to the beach mainly late at night to sleep over there, sleep on the beach rather than on concrete, sleep on the beach, and then most of them come back on the Sunrunner in the morning. But that violates an ordinance in St. Pete Beach that you're not allowed to sleep on the beach. And so his deputies were stationed out there and arresting individuals that were sleeping on the beach, trespassing a bunch of people. And he told me that it certainly was not sustainable, and that I had committed, as I told the board and the citizens at the meeting, to work with the sheriff to come up with some kind of solution. I then had a conversation with Mayor Welch, where I had already talked to him, and he was at that point not willing to. He wanted to keep the Sunrunner free, and he had included that money in his budget for 2024 to keep it free. And the city council, I understood, had very positive discussions so far this summer on including the money to buy down the fares, give PSDA the money so that Sunrunner could remain free. He wanted us to look at other options besides implementing a fare. So we did. We implemented a whole security effort to complement the sheriff's effort. And I reported on that to the executive committee last week on how that was going. It seemed, from our perspective, going very well. That we had gotten the number of homeless individuals to go down a lot so far, in 1 week's effort. And we had also done a lot of deep dive into the data that had been presented to the board from the citizens, and concluded that no, that crime has not increased in St. Pete Beach from last year to this year during the period that Sunrunner has operated. It just simply has not. What we were able to confirm, and then what the sheriff told me, and then what we were able to confirm is that, yes, there are homeless individuals that are riding the Sunrunner for free to the beach and sleeping there at night, and not in greater numbers than there certainly were before on the transit that goes there. The sheriff was insistent that the only thing that he would be satisfied with was PSDA implementing a fare. And I said, the PSDA board has voted to implement a fare on November 1st. The mayor, the mayor's budget and the city council of St. Petersburg wants to keep it at zero fare. He said, okay, I'll talk to the mayor, and but you have to come up with a plan to implement a fare much sooner than that, by August 15th. That was because his sheriff deputy and his costs of providing that service where they were arresting people that slept over there at night was too expensive for him to maintain going forward. So he needed some kind of relief on that. I talked to the mayor again. Well, let's see. No, the day after the executive committee, the sheriff calls me and I report to him that everyone has told me on my staff things are getting better. No. He was like, I am sad to report that that is not the case. That is not true. My sheriff deputies are arresting the same number of people, they're trespassing the same other people, the same amount of people are riding on the Sunrunner to homeless individuals are riding and going and sleeping on the beach at night. We then checked it with our own eyes. We had our own staff ride and confirmed that there is pretty much homeless individuals riding all day to the beach. It's legal during the beach, but it's not legal at night, right now. And there are these sheriff deputies that are there at the beach right now, as of even this week, that if they catch you sleeping on the beach or doing any other kind of crime, they're going to arrest you. That is going to end. The sheriff says, I have to end it, and you have to implement a fare. If you do not implement a fare by August 15th, I will contact the PSA board members and force you to implement a fare.
So how can he, I gotta stop you right there.
Well-
Do we have an attorney in the room? Because
Well,
he can't, and I was quiet as I sat over there because I wanted to wait until it was my committee time, since I did hear the presentation. He can come to the board, and I like Sheriff Bob Galtieri, and there's an issue and we need to deal with it. But he can't come to our board and tell us to do something or mandate it any more than I can go to him and mandate that he do something with his sheriff's officers.
Right, yes.
So what he can do is, he can come, he can share what he has seen and what he has observed and what his additional costs are, his cost overruns out of his budget, because that's what he's looking at. And then he can say, this is my recommendation to make this occur. But let me say this real quick about this 50-cent fare. Unhoused homeless people panhandle during the day. Do you really think they're not gonna come up with 50 cents to ride the bus? I'm just,
respectfully, I do not, I do think this will limit their ability, because you cannot pay cash. They have to have a credit or a debit card or a Flamingo card. Now, will some get a Flamingo card? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they will. And the sheriff knows that. The sheriff knows that this
I
is
just
not-
want us to be thoughtful in the conversation, because I didn't know anything about the 50 cent till I read it in the paper. I'm sure it's other people. And I got a number of calls, and I just shared with Brad, who I got a call from at an elevated voice while I was sitting in the parking lot before I came up. So I do appreciate this presentation before everybody, but I think this needs to be a presentation that is before the entire board, and allow the board to make that decision and invite the sheriff to come, or his representative, whoever he sends, to talk about it. Is there an issue? Yes, it is. I agree. It is an issue. Do we need to deal with it? Yes. But I just get a little irritated when persons want to put everything on one department or one organization, because homelessness or persons being unhoused is a national issue. It's not just PSTA's issue. It's not just the city of St. Pete issue. St. Pete Beach is now feeling what some of us have been feeling for years. Homeless have been sleeping in St. Pete, down at the Spa Beach, in Williams Park. They sleep in the doorways of businesses, all of that for years. So I agree with what St. Pete Beach's concerns are. They are valid, and they're going through it, but they are not the exception to the rule. They've just now been added to the party, unfortunately. I'm sorry. I just had to say
If I
that.
just, I'll quickly finish. I reiterated to the sheriff that the PSA board had voted to have it free until November and implement a fare on November 1st, which he said was not acceptable. And then I said, I just want to be clear, the city of St. Petersburg is looking like they're going to approve of the funding to continue it beyond that day. And he said, well, no, I've talked to the mayor. And what he told me was that the mayor had agreed that a fare needed to be implemented. Now, I very much appreciate the sheriff, but I checked with Mayor Welch to, is that true? What he told me was that he did agree that something needed to be done. This was different than the week before, that now he was willing to do some sort of fare. He proposed a zero fare, which I checked on, it is not possible. But to do a zero fare of some kind of step to ride the Sunrunner. And he had talked about it with his city staff, and they had issues. They knew that it really probably wouldn't work very well. But that he had told the sheriff that he was willing to do something. So this was new news to me after the executive committee had met. And the sheriff reiterated that he is insisting on implementing a fare or else. And because I understand the directive, I understand that I don't report to the sheriff, and I wasn't sure if he could arrest me for not doing, but,
Watch out when you leave the parking lot.
trying to come up with a solution to satisfy both issues and work on, as Commissioner Flowers clearly says, a nationwide issue that we have no real ability to implement, solve homelessness.
So how does a zero fare, how does that different than a free? Because you have to have a device that,
You would have a device, yeah.
okay.
So what we came up with in a brief period of time was a pilot that at least was in the spirit of both these fine leaders of our community's ideas, to implement a limited fare. 50 cents was as close as I could get to zero, but 50 cents only in one direction, just to access the beach. Just to access the beach. The rest of Sunrunner, in the spirit of St. Petersburg wanting to keep it free, and the PSA board wanting to keep it free till November 1st, would remain free. Now, there was lots of questions at the last committee meeting. Aren't people going to evade the fare? Are people going to get around? Are they going to just go to another station where it's free and then ride around? No, we're going to have, like we had planned on Sunrunner from the beginning, an inspection process to ensure that that people are paying the fare. We're going to have that whether we launch a full fare or we're going to have that no matter what. That is going to happen on Monday. The plan is to implement it on Monday. I've spoken to the sheriff about this directly. I've left multiple voicemails for PSDA board leadership and the mayor. This is happening on Monday. And again, this is a 50-cent fare to go to the beach only. It is free on all the stations to go to downtown St. Petersburg. All the stations. For what it's worth, the citizens of St. Pete Beach are very happy. I understand that the mayor, as of yesterday, he has concerns. He has concern that he didn't agree to this specific plan, and I agree with that. He did not. He still hoped to work out some sort of zero fare arrangement. That was my original proposal to the sheriff too. that we would continue to have free fares till November 1st, and then I would set up a meeting between the mayor and me and the sheriff. And the sheriff said, well, that wouldn't be possible unless there is a fair instituted. We're trying to come up with the best solution for PSDA, for the long-term success of Sunrunner. At the finance committee, I'm the most optimistic person that this is gonna work. The finance committee was not on board. I think we'll find out very quickly whether it works or not. I'm optimistic that this will keep Sunrunner a positive success, because the vast majority of existing rides will still be free, will still be no cost. And hopefully, it can be administered in a way that we can manage the flow of riders to the beach.
Thank you, Brad. Are there questions, comments from board members? Commissioner Flowers?
That's okay. So, what I had mentioned at the executive team meeting was to see if the call team, which is that social service arm that the St. Petersburg Police Department paid for as a pilot, Gulf Coast Jewish Family Community Services is the lead agency on it. They've been working at on Central Avenue at the bus circle down there, and other places, as well as HLA, the Homeless Leadership Alliance, and the COC, in trying to provide services and get those individuals to, rehab centers or whatever services they need in order to try to take them from being homeless to housed. And that particular program was just awarded additional funding for 5 more years. So I had suggested to see if we could have those individuals riding on the bus, so that if someone homeless or unhoused got on, they could then begin to interact and see what they could do to assist that person. Because if they're going down to the beach because of the coolness in the evening or whatever, it's because they're unhoused. And I did mention that this morning to Doyle when he called me on behalf of the mayor before I came up here. I had not had a chance to speak with the HLA people. But my concern or my issue is, so if I have somebody who started off in St. Pete downtown, they're on the Sunrunner, then once they get to what point are they now going to be asked to pay the 50 cents? Because they could be taking, like, what if I took the Sunrunner from downtown, and there's a spot like 2 blocks away from my house, a drop off where I could get off and walk back to my house.
Yeah.
So how is the bus driver supposed to know that I'm getting off there? Or if I decide, oh, you know what, I want to ride onto the beach, that's going to be another 50 cents. So I'm just curious about how that'll work. That's number one. Number two, even though you're saying that they would have to pay by a card or whatever, homeless individuals will be able to afford to find a way to get a card to get down there if that's what they want to do. Because they are finding ways to move throughout the community now. I guess my other observation is, and no one will probably like this, but St. Pete Beach doesn't pay in the PSTA, am I correct? And I served on PSTA from 1999 when I was elected, and I served for 5, maybe 6 years. St. Pete Beach never wanted to pay into PSTA. They did not want the service on their beaches because of the inference of who utilized public transportation. So, if you want to look at a measure, just don't run it down to the beaches, and that stops it. And you don't have to figure all this stuff out. You don't have to, it's unpopular. This is going to be an unpopular position, I know, but I'm just giving it out. You don't have to worry about it running to the beach. You don't have to worry about who's going on the beach. You don't have to worry about none of that. Turn the Sunrunner around prior to and keep it going in the other direction. Because I really, this may curtail it for a minute, but where there is a will, there's a way, and I do not believe it is going to stop persons from going down to sleep on the beach. Now, is my last option my desire? No, it's not, because there are people who enjoy coming from the beach down to St. Pete and along the way, and that's penalizing them. You know, penalizing persons who are utilizing it for the right reason, because we have this small contingent that is unfortunately utilizing it to find a cool place to sleep. And some of them may be doing things they shouldn't be doing. I get that, but I love your optimism. I don't think it's gonna work. And I will say this, and Brad, this is no negativity on you, but I know it was an article in the paper, and I'm gonna be honest, I have back-to-back meetings, so I don't always go in and read my emails as soon as they pop up. So I read my emails when I get a moment, like today, I had a moment before I came in here. I was going through my emails if I have time in between, so I didn't get a chance to see the communication prior to it going out. But I saw it once it went out, so nothing negative, just saying that on something big like that, even though it's something that you were making a decision based on staff administratively, it just kind of made me feel like I was behind the 8 ball before it got out in the community, and then before people started calling and stuff. So maybe we can work on that. That's a whole separate
Yes.
issue.
And no doubt, with the deadlines that I was given, I feel like we are behind the 8 ball on this, no doubt. This is very rushed.
And I appreciate
You know.
the sheriff's sense of urgency. I mean, he's running a tight budget. I know what he's asking for next year from the county, and I know how tight it is, so I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying that there are some things he can't turn on a dime in his organization because it takes time. So when you're talking about something this big and how many partners it affects, it is difficult to turn it around on a dime like that. So, I'm sorry.
No worries. That was
That's
your
it for me.
moment. Commissioner Albritton?
I kind of agree with you. I mean, the homeless in Clearwater, not all of them, but most of them have a cell phone and a bank account. They still want to sleep on the floor, on the ground somewhere. And they'll figure out a way to get down to the beach if that's the coolest place to sleep.
How's Clearwater keeps that on the beach?
Well, we don't. I mean, it's part of life, Maybe St. Pete Beach hadn't realized that yet. But I would not want to put a barrier to, like, people wanting to go to the beach. The 50-cent fare, for a person that's maybe going down to spend money at the beach. And, until November, I just don't want to see that happen, put a roadblock up for anybody there. I don't know, this is an unintended consequence to a good
A good thing.
yeah, good thing, and they happen daily. I mean, I hear about great ideas, and then, then we implement them, and then we have an unintended consequence. I don't know. I mean, is your pilot program, how long is that lasting? All the way to November? Or is
It was 1 month. A 1 month pilot.
Okay. I don't know. I think if we do this, there'll be an unintended consequence on the other end. So I'm kind of opposed to it. I wish we could come up with, and I like thinking out of the box. I think you did a good job on that, but there's gotta be another way.
Commissioner
This,
Albritton?
this pilot has not been implemented, is that correct? It's still being proposed, or has it been implemented?
Well, it's going on, in fact, on Monday.
Going in on Monday, and so
It's
that's.
coming Monday.
Oh, it started on Monday. So we are
It's starting on
currently-
the 21st of August.
Oh, it's this coming month.
This coming Monday.
But it's a done deal for a month. We're not here debating whether or not we're gonna do it. We're debating how to respond to the fact that
That's
now
correct.
there's something coming up. Because I don't think this passes the logistics test, and I don't think it passes the smell test. Now, I'm on a different point of view. I think we should have been charging for Sunrunner starting with the new year. And then you would have not had this. And now let me be clear, on November 1, is the city going to subsidize all of Sunrunner so that no one would pay a fare on Sunrunner according to that proposal by the mayor? They're gonna pay for all of Sunrunner, the buses, the drivers, I'm just, because that's,
Oh, no,
that's
oh,
important. That's important.
No, not the operating cost.
Okay.
They are going to buy down the fares
Okay.
for the riders.
So how much will the fares be on November 1?
Well, without any buy-down program from the city, they will be the regular fares, $225.
And so what will they be with the buy-down from the city? Will there be a fare November 1, or are we talking about no fare on November 1? Because
Well-
if that's the case, that's a non-starter for me. You're talking about, if they're subsidizing all of Sunrunner, well, that's great. You know, you could make the argument that they're paying for it, but I wanna know what Sunrunner costs in its entirety, buses, maintenance, drivers, the whole shooting match. And then if they want the fares to be zero, I wanna see that number match from St. Petersburg, or some combination of other municipalities, and they're not gonna do that, right?
We're respectfully, and we have the city of St. Petersburg, we have the city of Clearwater.
Sure.
Other cities that do this very same thing, where they buy the fares to make a service for free. PSTA receives the revenue from city of Clearwater for the spring break, for the Central Avenue Trolley in St. Petersburg. They're not paying the full cost of the service. They're buying the fares instead of the customers having to pay.
Right. Okay, and so we will have this problem November 1. I would make a different argument if I thought there was gonna be a fair November 1.
So let me also interject there, because this is a proposal from the city.
Yes.
To buy down the fare. We have not agreed to accepting
correct.
it. We have not agreed to changing the fares. So we have not agreed in our budgetary process. We can still move forward with a full fare November 1st, the way we planned,
Yeah.
regardless of what the city is offering to pay. So I just want to be clear that this isn't a done deal, that we've already agreed and it's already fully administered. So it is still just a proposal. So it's not a done deal as of November 1st.
And so I would say that I don't, 1 month we're stuck with. We're stuck with a month pilot test at this point. And, am I not correct? 2
Well-
months.
So, except that if this comes before the board on Wednesday, so it starts on Monday, and on Wednesday, the board says, no, we cannot do that, then that ends the pilot program, right?
We can end it after 2 days, or, I don't know, we could probably end it after like a week. You know.
So it's not that there's no say or control. It's not gonna, what Brad's indicating is it's not gonna stop based on what this committee votes on today.
Right.
But certainly,
Well-
although I would implore him, if it's gonna go to the board, to wait until Wednesday instead of implementing and then stopping.
Because that's even more confusing.
Right,
Yeah.
but there is some latitude here. It's not.
Well, I would suggest it does come to the full board,
Mhm.
and that we hold off until Wednesday, because the worst thing to do would be to implement a program on Monday and have it rescinded on Wednesday. Although I've got to say, and I also give kudos to Brad for trying to come up with a creative solution. It doesn't pass the smell test, it doesn't pass the logistics test, but I don't know of an alternative unless we want to just challenge the sheriff directly, which I would do, because he doesn't tell us what to do, and we all recognize we have a problem. But you don't call somebody and tell them how to do their business with a week's notice. That's just not how business is done. And you're right, that's not what would happen if we called the sheriff's department and said we want to change some way that they operate their department. They would not allow that. So I'm sympathetic with everyone. I don't think there's any simple answer to this, but I don't like it as an answer.
Thank you, Commissioner Dowd.
Thank you. Brad, you said it's a pilot program, so, which implies it's testing period. You said 1 month, so we're gonna say August 21st to September 21st. What are the matrix involved to determine whether or not the pilot program is successful or not?
I have suggested come up with some definitions of success. I can get those to you. Include monitoring the number of unhoused individuals that are sleeping on the beach. Obviously, that is one of the, no doubt, that is one of the goals of the pilot program. The other is overall ridership on Sunrunner. It is my belief that if we are, and obviously I'm doing a terrible job of communicating this, but if I do a better job somehow of communicating how this is so targeted to just the beach, 90-some% of riders on Sunrunner will be unaffected ever. They will keep riding and being happy, hopping on and off, going to different shops, going to the Rays games, going to the pier, doing all this stuff they're doing. I don't know if that is, obviously it's not coming across that way. But there will be, we will have metrics, and then on September 21st, or the next meeting, I will report on whether it was a success or not.
And all this kind of started with the residents of St. Pete Beach complaining. And right, we've done, at least on our analysis and their analysis, have kind of determined that crime really hasn't increased, or where it has, can be tied back to the riders on the Sunrunner. So it's a St. Pete Beach issue. Are the residents of St. Pete working with the sheriff on increasing law enforcement, and what's that costing the residents of St. Pete Beach? Do they have any skin in this game, or are they just throwing it all back on PSDA?
Well, go ahead.
So what you're saying is we don't know what the sheriff's office is billing the city of St. Pete Beach for those additional services?
And what are the city of St. Pete Beach paying for those services?
There is a set rate that the sheriff charges. There's an agreement between the sheriff's office and that municipality when the sheriff is providing services. And then if there are overtime hours and things of that nature, that is presented. It's not like they turn around and bill the city additionally because there's an increase in cost. I believe what the sheriff is saying is, this is what we billed for this contract. And by me having to have officers out there to cover this specific issue, I'm now having to pay these officers, which was never a part of the original contractual agreement. So it does make the sheriff's costs higher, because 9 times out of 10, the officers who are covering that area, if it's not their regular shift, it's someone picking up overtime. So time and a half for that officer, depending on their pay grade, determines how much the time and a half would be. I don't know off the top of my head what the contractual dollar amount is that St. Pete Beach negotiated with the sheriff's office for the service. So any municipality that brings the sheriff in to provide services, they have a contractual agreement and they agree on the costs.
It's my understanding that the
so I
sheriff
don't
has
know.
deployed additional deputies, and what he kept telling me multiple times, it was $10,000 a week to him, and he was not going to get reimbursed from the city of St. Pete Beach
So,
for
yeah.
this. What he agreed to a 3-week lockdown, $30,000, not reimbursed by the city.
So he's probably paying those officers time and a half.
Right.
And like I was saying, that wasn't a part of the initial contract. So this is over and above what he's already negotiated. So, and then I get what you're saying. So is the city of St. Pete Beach going to be paying the sheriff for his increase in costs in order to monitor and try to work with this situation? And I don't know if those conversations have occurred or would occur. That conversation would then need to be between the city manager with St. Pete Beach and its council, out there to have that. That's a good thought, though, but, yeah.
Yeah, because that is what the sheriff is trying to do, and I would nothing against the sheriff on them, but his costs are increasing. And it's outside the contractual obligation of the city, he's trying to recoup his costs. I get that, as well he should. But the idea that this is being put, especially putting Sunrunner in a negative light,
Yeah.
and a negative light on the unhoused as well. That if crime isn't increasing, it's like, where is that responsibility? And it seems to be put squarely on PSDA when St. Pete Beach is the one complaining about it. And also now that I'm finding out that they aren't even paying towards public transit in general. So it's like how sweet it is to live on St. Pete Beach. Because I do think part of the problem is they are now being made aware of a problem that St. Pete has been dealing with for a very long time. And I don't know, I just at least wanted to bring up my connection to everything else, and so that's part of the conversation. And I think with any pilot program, there needs to be matrices, what determines whether it's successful or not. You know, and so, yeah, if you could talk to us at some point about what those measuring points are within the pilot program, that would be great.
And to that point,
Yeah.
I think the matrix you would have would be how many persons are sleeping on the beach and actually detained, because there could be people who actually are unhoused that ride the Sunrunner and actually go back
Right.
down. So you couldn't count just who's getting on the Sunrunner, because if they're going down and coming back, then they're not a part of or creating the concern that has to ride. The concern is, there is a law in St. Pete Beach against sleeping on the beach, and there are people who are sleeping on the beach.
So, I know Commissioner Albrecht, wouldn't it just be
I'm
easier for
sorry.
St. Pete Beach to just change the law and make it legal to sleep on the beach? I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
You gotta get to know St. Pete City.
No, no.
St. Pete City Council.
Commissioner Albrecht.
So you asked me,
St. Pete Beach
what do we
does
do
work.
about that in Clearwater?
Yeah.
And I can tell you what we do. You know, Clearwater
Well, they're just saying that.
used to be a sleepy little resort town, and now it's like tripled. You know, we have to
We'll talk after.
pay more in FTEs to hire more police officers.
Yeah.
And not because people are sleeping on the beach, just because there's more people on the beach. So I would say, St. Pete Beach is a different animal. I mean, they love to say, hey, our beach is as good as Clearwater Beach, and they're always in the advertisement, come to St. Pete Beach. The Sunrunner was very valuable in bringing more people to St. Pete Beach. The economics in that, I'd like to know, because if there are more people coming down, there are more people spending money on St. Pete Beach. And they don't seem to want to recognize that issue. But I tell you, that St. Pete Beach never really wanted the Sunrunner to come down. I remember going to a council meeting when we were proposing the Sunrunner, and it was like torches and pitchforks down there. They just didn't want to have a bus service down here. They needed to have it. So now this is one of those things that come along with better economics. You got this unintended consequence, and I think it's something, I really think St. Pete Beach needs to deal with it. I mean, it's the good with the bad. And they don't seem to, want to do that.
So one of the things that was presented in the finance committee meeting was that people, unhoused individuals are taking the bus late at night and then sleeping on the beach and then getting back on the bus and coming back into town. Okay, so I understand that sleeping on the beach is illegal. I also understand that the residents of St. Pete Beach are not walking on the beach at 3 in the morning and tripping over unhoused people, right? So this is it doesn't feel good issue. Now, if there are legitimate other crimes and things like that, then that's something that we need to talk about. But the crux to this whole thing seems to be about sleeping on the beach. And I don't understand how the folks in St. Pete Beach, look, I'm in bed by 10. If someone's coming down to my neighborhood at 11 o'clock and then sleeping on my grass and then getting up and leaving before 6 o'clock in the morning, I don't know about it. Unless obviously there's trash and other things. I'm not trying to, you can't cover everything. But it just seems like this is creating a huge, a knee-jerk response that hasn't had the chance to be vetted or thought out. It's going to affect whether it's realistically or perceptually the other riders of Sunrunner and the businesses, and it will affect other folks. We are 2.5 months away from, at least based on current voted on policy, implementing full fares on the Sunrunner. My view is that we ask the sheriff to work with us by working with us until November. Our plan is to get it in place, and now that may all change if the board then ultimately decides to work with the city on fare free and other things, but I'd like to see some actual proposals come forward and then decide on that, as opposed to just reacting and then trying to communicate that back out to the public. I think it winds up tarnishing the Sunrunner more so, even if it's just a pilot program, than what's currently going on. And I would invite the sheriff to come and explain and talk to us about what really is happening, because we have, numbers provided by a citizen. Those numbers don't all correlate to unhoused persons and crime caused by those folks. The data on the Pinellas Crime website is spotty at best. I'd also be interested in knowing how the crime has changed in St. Pete Beach versus other beach communities that the Sunrunner does not service, right? Is this just hey, it's not a pandemic anymore. People are traveling. The world's awake and coming to St. Pete Beach and Treasure Island and Madeira Beach and Indian Rocks, right? Like, let's see what's really going on, as opposed to throwing this immediately all on PSTA and saying, you guys solve it, without any real vetting of how that will impact other stakeholders. So I realize this committee doesn't necessarily have any power to stop anything, but I would ask Brad to potentially reconsider starting this on Monday and wait until the board has a chance to talk about it on Wednesday, and consider it fully, and hear from whichever stakeholders want to come and share their thoughts, so the board can be deliberative and react appropriately. So I don't know if there's any additional comments, or if there's a motion at all.
I just want to share, when the residents came forward, the majority of it was that, they're sleeping on the beach. There was a gentleman that talked about, I believe it was a family member of his that was approached inappropriately by a person. One person was a business person, I wanna say Dolphin something, but anyway, it was a concern where that person was, around the business, unhoused persons were around the business area during business hours, and it was becoming a concern between the people that were coming to their business and the unhoused persons. And we know that they, stop you, ask you for money, sometimes they'll cuss you out if you don't, they'll say unpolite things if you don't help them, whatever. So one did kind of say something about that, but the majority of it was, that I recall, the majority of it was focusing on, we have an increase in numbers in crime, and the perception was, or the presentation from them was, that those homeless persons were the persons that were responsible for that. And again, if they're being arrested for trespassing and sleeping on the beach, that's against their law, but that is nowhere near the assaults and things like that they had on their chart, where I did see some numbers that were increasing.
Well, there was also a concern about Molotov cocktails.
Yeah.
So, how much of that
No,
how much of that are actual crimes? How much of those are perceived or concern about potential crimes?
Yeah.
Right, and so, I think a lot of us like to be data-driven in our decisions, and we'd like to see
Mr. Oliver definitely is
you know,
dangerous.
what is it.
I'm about
and
ready
how-
I'm about ready to say, just charge the fares and keep it moving, cause
That's by anecdote. One person got up and talked about somebody screaming in the middle of the street. Well, one person sees that and they tell 20 more people, and all of a sudden it's a crisis. There's hundreds of people. So how many do they arrest for being on the street, for sleeping on the beach? Do we know that number from the sheriff's department? And then, how much of this is a death by anecdote, and 7 people, which you see in St. Pete every day, doing something that they're just not used to? So I'm with Josh. I think we ought to have a full board discussion on this, and I would not implement something on Monday. I would be very nervous about doing something like that, not knowing where the board is, unless you have a different sense of it. Well, if the sheriff comes and arrests you, we'll bail you out.
Is that budgeted?
You might.
I don't know if we have a.
So
Staff
one
won't.
other thing, I read the Farmer's Almanac the other day to see when the heat was gonna subside.
Yeah, when's that?
And it looks like the end of September. I mean, that, it goes down and then you can see the lower temperatures. So maybe this is a thing that's just gonna last another month.
Well, and during this pilot, we're also going to have, potentially hurricanes, which will
Yeah,
change the
there you
nature
go.
of, or is the metric of showing that the arrests are going down on the beach because the sheriff just stops going to the beach during the pilot and arresting people and says, yes, arrests are down, but not necessarily the actual infraction. So there's so many different ways to play this, And Commissioner Gao put it, I thought really well, that out of all the different stakeholders and all the different players, the only ones having to make an adjustment here is, we're being told to make an adjustment is PSTA.
Yeah.
And that's not enough.
And I appreciate
I love
your
you, Brad.
comments, Chair, but I need to defend, the sheriff has not said that.
Okay.
The sheriff has not said it is PSD's problem and not my, the sheriff has been great to at least talk to me, very strong in his insistence on implementing a fair by August 15th, which I have already missed, and that has to be part of the solution. But he has not said this is PSD's problem. He understands, and I've reiterated 100 times to him, I am a bus guy. I transport everybody, even if they don't have a house, to wherever they need to go. And I don't ask questions. And I really don't have any ability to do anything else besides, drivers, driving the bus. And he understands that. This is a very, very difficult issue, even for him. He understands this is part of, he said, this has to be part of the solution.
Well, then he should, then he owes it to the process to come to the board meeting and explain that, so that we can hear, if he presents great evidence that indicates to board members in the majority that that is the right solution, then that's the right solution, that'll pass. But I think there's enough pushback here due to either, whether it's lack of information or misinformation or perceived misinformation, whatever you wanna call it, it just doesn't, it feels like it's coming too hard, too fast, and not as well thought out. And so I think we've had a good bit of discussion on this. I don't know if there is any motion. It is an action item. We added it to the action items. So I'll leave it there. I will entertain a motion if one. If not, we can move on.
I would like to make a motion that we move this conversation as a presentation before the full board, for a presentation by staff, regarding the potential options set before us, which is a 50-cent fare going out to St. Petersburg Beach, no fare, and maintaining the structure the way that it is until November 1st, which is when we are supposed to have the implementation of fares.
All right, that is a motion on the table. Is there a second to
I'll
that?
second that with the, like a little addition to it, too, that also we would have the option to maybe push forward the,
To move up to fill fare?
yes.
I will
Yeah,
accept
well,
that
that
as,
would be one
I will accept that as a friendly amendment to the motion, that the third option be to expedite the full fare. I thought I did say that when I said to November
I'll
1st.
second.
Okay, so, because that's about where I am right now, just full fare, and that's clean. Either full fare or cut the service to St. Pete Beach. Those, that'll take care of it all. I mean,
I'm not sure how our FTA agreement will work out with
well,
that.
in the
but,
name of somebody.
So there is a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Not seeing that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Now, if an invitation
you.
could be
Passing
extended
that.
to the sheriff, and if he's not available, whomever he would like to represent him, if an invitation could be extended to ask if someone could be here to present on that for Wednesday.
I
I'm
think
just
it-
asking staff if they would
I
extend
would
that
think it also makes
invitation.
sense to extend an invitation to the elected officials in St. Pete Beach to talk about their role and how they may be a partner in this whole process.
I could support that.
So,
All you have to do is say yes or no.
all right. Well, and at a bare minimum, if we extend the invitation, then there can't be I wasn't invited later. I didn't have a part of a say,
Yeah.
right? The
Exactly.
opportunity, right, is important, because we do want to hear from everybody. We want to make sure, to the best of everyone's ability, that we're making the best decisions we can. All right, so, back to the printed agenda, information item 4A. Y'all give me the script, that went on there. So, 4A, the analysis of advertised service adjustments. Heather Sobush, our Chief Planning and Sustainability Officer, will provide some information and the proposed service adjustments. Brad, do you have service
I do want to
further
introduce,
introductions?
I want to introduce Heather. What'd you say?
Never mind.
Okay,
Or service reduction at St. Pete Beach?
yes, this presentation is based, this is an informational item to the planning committee. Based on the discussion at our last meeting, you will recall that that the PSA board voted on a slate of route adjustments, reductions, that was more than we need to balance the budget. but to kind of give options so we can get the public comments. There was concern echoed by the PSA board, and very respectful, but one commissioner voted against the service reductions with a spirit of just not wanting to, wanting to provide as much service as we possibly can, not making adjustments. And I've talked to him a lot about it, and I've thought about it a lot, and I asked Heather to make this presentation because I don't think it is the goal of PSTA to never cut a bus route or never change a bus route, because some people are running every bus route. But rather introduce, and I think Heather and her team have come up with a good set of adjustments that we can sometimes have to eliminate service to one area that is carrying very, very few people to redeploy it to an area that it can carry more people, given our available resources, that we can reinvest where the ridership is higher. And I think we have a good solution. We have an idea. Again, you saw how my first idea went. It's not 0 for 1. So see if Heather's idea goes better here. I just want to say that this is, we have come up with a plan, an idea. We're still getting public comment. But with the goal that we want to make PSA the most, not necessarily to run empty buses, but to run full buses in as many places as we can.
Thank you. So along those lines, today I'm going to show you our current ideas on not cutting everything that was on the list, but instead a combination of keeping some of the routes, modifying some of the routes, and then eliminating some of the lower performing routes. And so we've discussed these ideas internally. We've also discussed it with our bus plan consultant, and he agrees this is consistent with what we've heard in the past. They are still obviously starting their analysis, but our recommendations are consistent with public comment in the past. So just a little history. Some of the routes you're going to see in this presentation and that we've recommended and that are on the list have been brought to the board before. So we have some low-performing routes that have long been low-performing. In 2015, we brought some of those to the board, and at the time, due to public comment and other factors, the board did not agree to make any of the service reductions. They asked us to identify alternatives for riders for those routes if we were to cut them. So in 2017, we came back to the board. We had developed in 2016 the Direct Connect program. And so that program would allow people to get to our more frequent fixed route system. And based on that option, we were able to eliminate 2 low-performing routes and then do some adjustments to a couple other routes. So this is the list of the routes advertised for elimination. The top 6 are lowest performing routes, so they're low in productivity or ridership. And then we also had some other recommendations to reduce some trips on our limited express service that overlays Route 52, the western portion of the Central Avenue trolley, as that after Sunrunner, the whole trolley route went down in ridership by about 50%, but only 30% of the remaining ridership is in the western section of the corridor. Route 59, reducing the frequency, ending service at 10 p.m., as we discussed last month, increasing the PSTA access fares incrementally, and then not a service reduction, but looking at eliminating trash pickup service at bus stops. So I'm going to go through each of the routes on this list and discuss what our current thinking is on how we might adjust the routes. The Central Avenue trolley, again, I just mentioned it had a large ridership reduction from Sunrunner, and a small portion of the ridership is in the western section. We do believe there's plenty of alternatives for people. There's the Sunrunner, obviously, if they need to go all the way to the beach. And then there's also routes 18, Route 52, if someone wants to go to Tyrone Square Mall, or even all the way up to Park Street. And then to get to Pasadena, we do have the Route 79. And then I'm going to walk through the ridership trends for each of the routes as well. So you'll see pre-pandemic, the ridership was pretty high. It did drop during the pandemic and didn't recover, and then a further decline with the implementation of the Sunrunner. Next is Route 90, and this was on the list for elimination, but now what we're recommending is doing some modifications to the route. This route serves South St. Pete, and It's primarily people working on the beach in the hospitality industry. It goes over the Bayway, and it serves, a lot of the ridership goes to Tradewinds area, and then it goes up to, serves all the beach hotels. So it has 4 trips, so while it's low ridership, it only runs 4 trips, and those trips do have ridership. So it is productive, even though it's low ridership. And our alternative here is to restructure it such that instead of doing this giant one-way loop, that we run the service bi-directionally from South St. Pete to the beach. This would actually be better service for the people riding it. Not very many people are using it to go to Grand Central, and people that need to go to Grand Central have the options of the Sunrunner, or have the Sunrunner as an option. Here's the ridership on Route 90. Again, never fully recovered from the pandemic, but you see it's pretty steady there where it's kind of settled out. A little bit of drop of ridership with Sunrunner. That may just be people using the section from Grand Central to the beach. Then we have Route 58. This route serves Carillon. It travels along Brian Terry Road and serves Seminole Mall and St. Pete College Seminole campus. This route is kind of an interesting one in that it only primarily serves destinations. There's not a lot of residential along the route, and we think that's part of why it may not be the best in ridership. It doesn't have origins and destinations. So a lot of people are having to connect into the route, make transfers into the route to get to their jobs. The ridership is primarily at the ends, at Seminole Mall Gateway, and then along Brian Dairy at some of the industrial areas. So our proposal here is not to eliminate the route entirely, but to shorten it a bit, and so it doesn't do the Carillon Loop, which it only does that limited times a day anyway, and then it would end at the PSTA lay-by, which is right out here, where people can make transfers from high ridership routes, as opposed to going all the way to Gateway Mall.
Where is lay-by on that map? Too bad you don't have a laser pointer.
I might have a laser pointer. I don't know if I do. Oh, there I do. Let's see, where are we?
Turn.
Oh, you can't see it on this map because it doesn't serve it today.
No, the D, right?
Where's the D?
Oh, that's Raymond James.
No, that's Raymond
It's in
James.
between, it's at the bend.
It's over in here.
Right there before, yeah, right at the
Wait, say
end
Raymond
there.
James Towers, right?
Right before you go
Right
into
there.
Carolina or go down to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just right out here outside PSTA, yeah.
Thank you.
So it just wouldn't do all this stuff.
And that's called lay-by?
We call it the PSTA lay-by. It's our transfer center right out here by
Okay.
PSTA.
That's
what we call it. It
Transfer
is-
center would be better.
Okay, we'll call it a transit
Buses
center.
coming in and yeah.
You are correct. That would
you.
be much better for the riders.
Thank you.
And then ridership here on Route 58. You'll see a huge drop during the pandemic because we weren't running service for a period of time, and then post-pandemic, it's kind of settled into this pattern over here on the right.
Going up.
It's going up a little, yeah.
And then we have the Route 813. This route serves Dunedin and Palm Harbor. Some of the notable destinations or origins are not John Knox, I'm sorry. Palm Lake Village, senior, I think lower income housing, and then Dunedin High School. It's pretty much all suburban land uses. It's all residential. So again, we don't have that mix of origins and destinations. The Route 61 is a much better service in terms of frequency and span, and it does serve the Palm Lake Village apartments, and it serves Dunedin High School, and we know that kids from Dunedin High School are using it. We have video evidence. Lots of them are using it. So we think that probably a lot of the ridership is not going onto the 813 because of the nature of the route. And the Route 61 takes people to both Park Street and Countryside Mall, and the 813 also served Countryside Mall.
And this is the lowest rider.
Oh, yeah, sorry. This is the lowest ridership route in our entire system and the lowest productivity route.
It
So there's
does.
only 1 or 2 people per trip. Yeah. And then here's the ridership of that, less than 1,000 per month. As with the other routes. I don't know what that spike is there in the pandemic, but we'll just look post-pandemic here.
That's true.
And then Route 814, this one serves Safety Harbor. And so it goes between Countryside Mall, Main Street, Safety Harbor, and Philippi Park. Also, it's our second lowest ridership route, very low in productivity. It's, again, suburban land uses, not the most transit supportive area that we serve. And then, so what we're proposing here is to develop a new mobility program. And so we have, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the East Lake Connector, but it's a on-demand service that connects people into the fixed route or into the DART service area. But something similar, but be like on-demand routing of a service. So we're still kind of, looking at those ideas. We're looking at using First Transit. They do have some extra vehicles that could be utilized for this service. And so, as I said, we're working on developing that as an option. Here is the ridership from the 814, again, lower than 1,000 riders per month. Then we have Route 32. This is a circulator in downtown St. Pete. It serves John Knox Apartments, St. Anthony's. This route, again, has also been a very long time, low-performing route, less than 1,800 rides per month. Alternatives that we've identified for Route 32 include Route 9, which serves St. Anthony's and has good frequency. It's 30-minute service, good span of service. And then Route 16 also serves St. Anthony's. Route 9 and the Sunrunner both also serve John Knox Apartments. So here again, ridership trends. We did see some drop with Sunrunner, so we believe some people are taking advantage of that service as opposed to the circulator. Then we have Route 5. Route 5 travels west of Grand Central. It used to travel into downtown, but we realigned Route 9 and put that had better ridership into Route 9. So now Route 9 serves the portion that used to serve downtown. This is less than 1,000 rides per month, one of our lowest in productivity. And so the alternative for that would be Route 7, which is a couple blocks north from the Route 5. Ridership, post-pandemic, very far below. Some of that is because the Route 5 was changed, as I mentioned, so some of that drop is from the change in Route 5, but then we've settled in here to pretty low ridership. And then we have the Route 52LX. This one doesn't have a ridership map, but this route is an overlay on top of the Route 52, and so it's limited stop. It's about 10% of the total corridor route ridership. What we're proposing here is that we just reduce some of the trips, and with the thinking that the local bus is often very close in proximity to the 52LX, and people could transfer or shift to that. And then we've talked about frequency and some span reductions. The frequency reduction we talked about was Route 59. It operates every 15 minutes, and changing that to every 20 minutes. And then span, we talked about eliminating service after 10 p.m., which is about 12 to 14 routes. Alternatives, well, basically, we are recommending possibly not making these changes. PSTA, our goals are typically to increase span, increase frequency, and not to reduce it. And that's, again, something that our riders have told us many times over the years. They want more frequency, they want more weekend service, they want more evening service. So this is not our preferred option that's on the list, but it is on the list. And then we have the PSTA MOD. It says access, but it's the MOD, Mobility on Demand portion of the access program, to incrementally increase the fares. So the first 2 trips in a day would be the same as they are today, $3.50 each. Third and fourth trip would go up in cost to about $6, or to $6, and then 5th trip and any trip after would be $10 each. The goal of this is to kind of reduce some of that demand. We've seen a very large growth in the MOD program over the last 2 years, as you can see on the right. So just trying to curb that a little bit, and then people would go back to the DART service if they need those trips. So just in summary, we're recommending eliminating the 4 very low ridership routes, restructuring 2 of the routes, making the reductions to the 52LX and the Central Avenue trolley, and then maintaining the frequency and span, and then incrementally increase the PSTA access fares. So happy to take any questions now.
Mr. Flowers?
Thank you, because I can see it better now.
Good.
You know, when you're, especially giving the diagram of the routes and where they go to, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for keeping 90, because I know when I've spoken to the hoteliers out there, you know, that's what I said at the last meeting. If we're gonna get rid of the route, is there an alternative for them? Because people from South St. Pete are using that to get to work on the beaches. And then the hoteliers have said, hey, you know, we don't mind paying for our employees to get to work. And then they also provide some bus passes going further up the beach way to some of their guests so that they can go in. So thank you for working through that. I know that Dr. Williams has really tried to advertise to her student population about utilizing the bus service, and I noticed that some of the routes, one that affects St. Pete College, off of 66th Street. So,
You're right.
yeah, so I'm not opposed to the restructuring there, but maybe just a communication, because she's doing a really big push about trying to increase her, the attendance at St. Pete College, and a part of that advertising, because I saw some of the commercials on TV is PSTA bus system.
Oh, great.
Yeah, she got a commercial, it's really nice, but anyway, but, if we are going to merge that, then I would just love, if that's the will of everyone on the board, I would love for us just to be able to communicate so she can fold that in, because she's using PSTA transportation as a super kudos for people to wanna come to the college. It was one other. So the Route 61 that services, that, the alternative, it would continue to service Palm Lake Village and continue to run by Dunedin High School, is that what you're saying? Since we
Yes.
see a decent ridership from the
Yes.
students there?
Mhm.
Okay, and I know that there is always the opportunity, if we see businesses coming in, larger developments coming in, to look at readjusting those routes. The reason I'm saying that is because there are quite a few things that may be coming through the county for proposals in the Caroline Center area.
Okay.
And so, if, I had mentioned this before, when our business development center or economic, development department are talking to corporations or businesses to move into the area, one of the things that we talk about is public transportation. And so, I just want to keep that consideration open, because to use that as a marketing tool when it may not be as readily available, we just need to make sure we're on the same page, so we're not
Yes.
saying something that doesn't exist. And the last thing that I want to say, and I'm just going to reiterate this again, y'all probably going to say I'm so sick of hearing they say this. It's difficult because on one hand, I have people always talking about wanting to take public transportation, but it's not available, the frequency isn't there, it doesn't get me to, all of that, which you all know. But on the other hand, then you have individuals saying, well, if the route is really not productive, why do we have that route if it doesn't have that many people on it? I think we're doing good, and congratulations to staff for us being recognized nationally as public transportation. That's fabulous to everyone, super kudos. But we are just getting here. Other communities, up north and out west, they've been doing this transportation thing a lot longer, and so they have that frequency there, and we're just getting to the point now where people are seeing public transportation as a positive thing to do, and not you're taking that because you're under income. I'm not gonna say poor, you're under income. So it's kind of hard to go out and sell it as you should really be taking public transportation, and then we're having to, which I understand, adjust our routes because of ridership, because we got to be able to pay for something somehow. So just want to keep that there, and if some things do come up in the areas, especially in Caroline, and the numbers would warrant it, I would hope that we could look at reigniting those routes if the board votes to make the changes that are being proposed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Oliver?
If we take this approach, how close does this get us to meeting the budget with the millage kept at the current rate? Will this get us to the 1.5 million we're trying to cut?
Yes, it's about 1.3, but yes, then we haven't included the trash concept in this
Okay.
calculation.
I would just comment about Route 58. Includes Caroline, includes the St. Pete College Seminole campus, includes City Hall, Recreation Center, and Library in the city of Seminole. The city of Seminole is writing a letter and sending a representative to the board meeting.
Okay.
And the provost of Seminole campus is coming. Feel very strongly, not just Caroline, but if you looked at that route, you see that it's actually starting to bump up a little bit. And part of the problem with that route is that the pandemic devastated the college. And there's, the provost will probably mention it, but they're moving a number of programs from the health center to the Seminole campus. And so there's going to be increased ridership there. And so I think there's a lot of arguments to be said for the concern there. And so my question is, when you look at cutting off Carillon and Gateway Mall, of the ridership on 58, how many folks that ride that route are at those stops? In other words, we know the ridership's low. Are you gonna be cutting off 20% of the riders if those stops aren't, and do we have that, well, we have that data,
So in the Carillon area, we have less than one average daily rider.
okay?
Gateway Mall does have good ridership, but we believe that would transfer over here to the PSTA Transfer Center, because it's also served by the Route 4, and Route 4 does come on here.
Could you do me a favor, because I don't want to take up a lot of time, could you send me the actual address of the transfer center and what routes are accessed through the transfer center?
Yes, certainly.
Appreciate it, thank you.
And if I could just add to Commissioner Oliver's point. Looking at the ridership on the Route 58, and again, this has been on the chopping block for 10 years.
Right.
Bryan Dairy Road, and I think what Heather said is correct, there's just not enough origins. The vast majority of riders on that route are coming, they're getting on the route from another bus.
Right.
They're taking transit from some other part of the county to get to a job or to St. Pete College. Heather can talk about, last night the folks on the track riders committee asked about Carillon, like how, we've tried over the years all different options to serve Carillon. It's just a suburban office park. It's very difficult for any public transit to get ridership there. We get so many more riders in other areas. The chair of the track, he rides a lot of people on the track ride the 58 sometimes.
Yeah.
And he said the better way is to take a direct connect Uber,
Huh.
a discounted Uber from Caroline over to PSTA here, they'll lay by,
Right.
and then catch all the routes here. That's what he said, what he did.
That's what he does.
Yeah.
Commissioner Cox?
Could you go to page 20, please? It's the incremental access fare increases. There you go. And just look, everybody, at July 20 of 21 and then May of 2023. That spike in rides on the MOD. It's a lot. And we've learned already that we can change a fare, or add a fare or whatever, like in a snap. If we just would make, the PSTA would make the fare for MOD identical to the fare for the ADA required, the copay I'm talking about. The copay is $350 on MOD, it's $450 on the ADA required service. There is right there, May of 2023, $20,000 more. In revenue for PSTA, and if you do that over 12 months, there's $240,000. To me, it's a no-brainer. I don't understand why we're not doing it right now. I truly don't understand why we're not doing it. Why won't we have those fares equal?
Because we're trying to incentivize, and we're trying to incentivize PSA access riders to ride MOD instead because it's so much lower
It's
cost.
not that much lower, Mr. Miller. I would like to see the numbers, and I've asked for them before, but it's truly not that much lower. And the average fare on Lyft is about $17, and if you take the copay, again, I've said this over and over again.
I know.
I don't.
So what we're recommending is a start. This is the start,
Well,
and we're gonna see how it goes.
It's 85. This is 85,000 a year. What's proposed right here, approximately, what is it? It just, I don't know why we're trying to incentivize. It's not that much of a difference in fare. It's just not for the ADA required service. So there's 240,000 a year right there, volume by additional revenue.
All right, Commissioner Gao?
Thank you, Josh. I feel somewhat obligated to say something. I'm the one that's gonna do this whole thing. One, the messaging, so much better, so much better. Thank you very much, than just of, hey, we can't make budget, here's what we're cutting. Thank you for what you've done to Dunedin, and certainly, representing Dunedin, I feel good about that, but I was concerned about all the routes. And as well, we all are. It still bothers me that we do this around budget time. I don't know what other time, but I'm trying to get away from the, hey, we're losing revenue, we need to respond to it, although I get that we do. I just think it's because it's the nature of what we do as a business. It just concerns me that you still have that bitter taste of cutting riders just to make a budget, although we have to live by that budget. But thank you for what you're doing. I still don't know, I brought up something in the last meeting, I want to bring it up here, because it kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and I don't know what to do with my own feelings. So thank you guys for being my therapist this morning. At least twice this year that we have voted for things knowing it was reducing revenue. We voted to expand the free fare on the Sunrunner, and we voted to give free fares to veterans. Started out as just disabled veterans, and now it's, if you're a veteran, you can ride for free. And I want to say the staff did a fantastic job on advising the board, we're going to lose revenue. And so I can't fault them at that. But what I didn't do as a board member, and I don't know that anybody else did as well, is make that connection. We're losing revenue, i.e. we might need to cut routes. We might, and had that been part of those conversations, if you want veterans to ride for free, understand we're gonna have to cut other routes. That conversation might have been different. Don't know that it would have been, but it might have been. I did vote for the free fares. I did not vote for the veterans. I did not attend that meeting, so I want to be clear about that as well. But there's a good chance I would have, because it's a feel-good moment. It's wonderful. We're all proud of our veterans for what they've done and continue to do. So it's just the idea that I want to see if there's room somewhere, and if this isn't the action item, let me know. But I'd like to see going forward, if staff is recommending something that has something to do with revenues or expenses, there is some sort of impact statement about routes and ridership. So at least it's in front of the board, this has the potential to increase routes for ridership, or this has the potential to decrease routes for ridership. So at least it's in front of our face, so we know when it comes to something. That should be part of it. So if that can be entertained, if this isn't the location or opportunity, please educate me. And then also, if this doesn't get us to the budget, and I know unfortunately we won't know today, but given at least the way I feel about the Sunrunner, and it sounds like that might be fixed a little ahead of time, depending on what happens Wednesday, but also the veterans, I know it's been passed by the board, and I know nobody on any board ever likes to circle back and re-vote. But because, at least for me, I don't know if that vote would change or not, and it potentially could even for my own vote, whether the veterans idea can be brought back up before the board, along with discussion of cutting routes, to see whether that would change or not. I don't know if that vote has sailed. I know that would be an uncomfortable request even on the board in Dunedin. Not about PSTA, but just Dunedin issues. So I get nobody likes to circle back. But I'm just trying to get, is there any flavor for that, at least among this committee, to do something like that?
Robert's Rules of Order states, and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially when there is a vote, if something is to be brought back before the committee, it needs to be brought back from the prevailing side. So it would need to be brought back by someone who voted yes. In other words, if it was decided it was to be brought back.
However, to discuss it in the context of the upcoming budget is a different circumstance, right? So it's not just, just because something was passed doesn't mean we've now completely lost control of the budget. We still have to decide to do that. So,
That is true. A presentation could be made relative to the financial impact of providing free fares to veterans, and that will be an estimate because we don't know exactly how many that would be, so you are correct.
so one of the things that I wanted to point out is, you know, the lack of presentation on the veterans project was not a fault of staff, because it wasn't on the table necessarily. It was an overexcitement by board members to just do something that felt good. You know, staff didn't have an opportunity to
And then
present those as,
wasn't the
here's an
recommend-
alternative, this is what would have happened, or this is what it means.
And that wasn't even recommended by the staff.
Right.
Yes.
So, but I do think that if we're talking about, in this sort of presentation, we're talking about alternatives, we're talking about like trash pickup changes and things like that we can do elsewhere. One of those could be, well, what if we did drop the veterans back down to just disabled veterans in this budget process? Right, now that we're starting to understand what it is, give people an opportunity to dial back that initial reach to see if it's the board's intent to keep those funds for other routes. So if it were me, I would add that as a potential alternative, just like some of these other funding alternatives. And it may not be, the board might still say, great, that's what we want to do, but I think to your point, it gives a little bit more context about what does that really mean for the organization as a whole.
Because it just seems odd to say yes for free fares to one segment of our community, and then to say, sorry, other parts of it, we're gonna cut your route completely. And even acknowledging that some of those routes that we're cutting could be to those same members of society that were saying, yes, you can ride for free.
Thank you for giving me free fares I can't take.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so it's just, so we're aware. And so, given that conversation, where we might stand from a Robert's Rules of Order standpoint, what are the next steps? What are my next steps? What, do I bring this back up at the board level? Can this be, from this committee, be made part of a presentation item? I just want to be able to sleep tonight. And so I'm looking for guidance.
You can make a motion and see if there's a second. I'll tell you, that board meeting was chaotic, and people were leaving, it was late, staff didn't get a chance to talk about it, there was no discussion of financial impact. Josh and I were the only two people that voted against it. And for the exact reason that you're mentioning, because nobody talked about what the cost would be or what the impact on the budget would be. It was horribly done, and it wasn't staff's fault. People were leaving, they were bailing, it was after 12. It was a very difficult process, and people felt good, and who doesn't want to support the veterans? And I had somebody come up to me afterwards and say, you're not going to get invited to the veterans program. Nasty. You know,
that wasn't nice.
but that's neither here nor there. The point is, everybody wants to support the veterans. We clearly do. I don't know if the appetite, it'd be interesting to see from the other people who were here, who voted for it, if there would be an appetite to bring it back up. But I didn't feel good about it at the time because it hadn't gone through the process that we normally go through, the one that you outlined, to carefully understand the financial impact and the trade-offs that a decision like that would make. It was just brought up on the fly and made, and that's not the way we do business. So you can make a motion, see if it gets a second. I'd be interested from the other folks who voted for it to see if they think there'd be any appetite on the base from their colleagues on revisiting it. I kind of doubt it, but I'm with you.
I was on the side that supported it, and I also provided some possibilities of partnerships that would aid in paying, for it. One of them was the county has the VA department. We just got another director in for that. And I think I also mentioned even reaching out to the VA themselves, since they look at providing supportive services to their to their veterans who are trying to get to pay fines for hospital appointments or other doctor appointments. And then there are other VFWs and whatnot that have supported and partnered with us, even when we've done like the partnership for the Seminole Affordable Housing project and whatnot. So I did support it. I do support it because a number of those veterans are also persons who are unhoused. And that's something that came out as a result of the call operation that's going on in St. Pete. So I did vote for it. I do support it, and then I did provide staff with some opportunities to have further dialogue and conversations on how to help fund that financially. I don't know if, where they may be with that or whatever, but, and I fully understand, Mr. Oliver, what you just said. It was a conversation, it was a recommendation that came up from one of the, PST board members at the time, and yes, it was towards the end of the meeting, and it was a long day and whatnot, so, but I did support it, and I would continue to support it, but I would also charge myself with helping to find sources who would partner with PSTA to help cover the cost of transport for them. Yes, ma'am.
We are looking at alternate funding sources, whether it's through other organizations, et cetera, or to ourselves. Again, I think, everybody made a vote on this, and we're a very data-driven organization. It'd be interesting to see after 1 quarter where we stand on our assumptions, which would equate to approximately what we had anticipated in our revenue loss if we had done something just for disabled veterans. So it may be the kind of thing that we bring back let's review this after 1 quarter, so that nobody has to dial anything back on their votes, but then it becomes a very data-driven decision on how it's affecting the budget. Absorbing 89,000 is a lot easier than absorbing.
Yeah, in addition to the various charitable funds that we might be able to maybe acquire.
Right.
The legislative committee voted to move to the board meeting to prioritize a legislative ask to the state legislature as an idea to support veterans. Not knowing that the board might change their vote, but.
Commissioner Albritton?
Well, where do we stand on the trash can issue?
Well,
That's a big nut right there. I mean, I was surprised when we had to renew that trash compact. I mean, if we could make partnerships with different municipalities to help out, that would definitely help the budget.
we've had some discussions with a number of municipalities. I can't say it's gone as great as I had hoped. No city has just offered to take it over yet. So hopeful. We have 24. I haven't heard from all 24 yet. We are looking at ways in which we might just eliminate trash cans on very low usage trash cans and other to save money. Combination. City of St. Petersburg has been open to servicing some trash cans, but right now we're looking at ways in which we can save money by just reducing the number of trash cans in the county. There are 1,200 trash cans at just individual bus stops in Pinellas County, including in member jurisdictions where the property tax is not levied. Serviced by PSTA, paid for by PSTA tax dollars. Again, it's my belief, I don't know, that if there's no trash can, since there is a trash can on every PSTA bus, the riders will not just throw their trash on the ground, they will put it in the trash can on the bus. So I'm not sure what the value of having all these trash cans out is. So we're looking at that. We'll have a recommendation with some data that we're putting together now by the time we vote on the budget.
Okay.
So, I would like to say that I do think that as part of the budget process, we can still show a disabled veteran expense, full veteran expense, and as part of the budget process, allow us to, because we're looking at other things that are already in the budget. Trash cans are already in the budget, but we're looking at making an adjustment because we need to. So we need to kind of put all of these pivot points, decision points back on the table, because that's what the whole budget process is all about. That being said, it is 12:06, so we are over our allotted time frame. I realize that was fast. And we have 2 more informational items and other business. So I wanted to make sure that board members that were not needing to pull away or do something else, I'm in it for the long haul, so,
Mr. Chair, I mean, just in the interest of time, what I would suggest, since we do have a guest speaker, I would suggest that we move the Sunrunners program next, and then, no offense to Debbie,
None taken.
we can do the Capitol, or you can have that for information in your packet.
okay. But are we still okay then continuing with the agenda with making that adjustment? Okay, just want to make sure we're going to lose our quorum or half our members here. So you're suggesting move on to 4C, the Sunrunner?
Yeah.
All right, so thank you for that conversation. Heather, thank you for the presentation, and I also appreciate the updates on changing routes. And it's not eliminating, but let's see how we can work within what we have to squeeze the orange a little harder.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that. We're going to move on to 4C, the Sunrunner Transit-Oriented Development Tracking. We'll hear a presentation from Jacob Labutka, PSTA's Planning Manager, who will introduce our speaker, and I apologize, I'm going to have to step out for a few minutes, but I will be I'm the Vice Chair.
Do you want us to
Carry
take a
on.
minute?
No.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. So I'm Jacob Labutka, Planning Manager here at PSDA, here really just to introduce our guest speaker, Anthony Close from St. Pete Rising. And he's going to talk about the work that they are doing to track the new development that is occurring within the Sunrunner Corridor. I think anybody that's been in the Sunrunner Corridor in downtown see lots of cranes that are going up. I feel like when I moved here 7 years ago, I was the tallest crane in the city, and now that seems to be certainly surpassed by all the development that is happening within the corridor. And so the city for many years has been priming the corridor for transit-oriented development, which helps, it's great to develop within the station areas that both creates more walkable communities and helps to encourage ridership. So they've been priming the corridor for years, even preparing for the New Starts application to fund the Sunrunner, and we've also been working with them on the Sunrunner Rising Development Study to look at the land use and zoning code along the corridor to encourage future development that is more transit-oriented. And also some national studies have shown, such as the American Public Transit Association, that development within near transit, that for every dollar that you put into transit, some studies like APTA's have shown that you get a 5-fold increase on your return. So we thought it'd be a great idea to partner with local urban development publication St. Pete Rising that already tracks development within the city to see kind of where we fit in the correlation of how development will occur along the corridor. So over the next year, they're going to be establishing the sort of development baseline of what development looked like, pre-Sunrunner or before it was constructed, and how development is being constructed currently and in the future along the corridor. And so with that, I'll invite Anthony Close, founder of St. Pete Rising, to tell you more. Here's the clicker.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jacob, for the introduction. As he said, my name is Anthony Close, founder of St. Pete Rising, a local urban development publication. We track all the new real estate development in South Pinellas in the greater St. Petersburg area, as well as new restaurants and retail, as well as being a news organization. I also want to congratulate PSTA on the recognition from APTA that was announced yesterday, and I'm proud to be working alongside you all. So to start off, St. Pete Rising uses a variety of sources to gather information, including public planning documents, developer interviews, and different conversations that we have in the community with our partners in the real estate industry who provide some of this information before it gets submitted to local governments and also throughout the planning process. So as everyone knows, the real estate industry can be very volatile, so some of the information that we keep track of changes over time and changes by the day and the week depending on market conditions. So we're going to do our best to keep track of some of the information as best as we can, but understand that it's constantly in flux. Real estate is constantly changing. Some of the metrics that we will be tracking will be primarily the project name, the address, and the station location closest to that, the number of residential units, and that includes rental units, condominium units, and townhome units that are included in each of these projects, the number of hotel rooms in development along the corridor, as well as the amount of commercial square footage that's in development on the corridor. And that can include things like new office space, new medical office space, and institutional space, which could include new municipal buildings, university buildings, and things of that nature. Also going to be tracking the number of retail square footage along the corridor and some of the physical characteristics to see what types of development are in the works, and that includes the floors of each building, some of the development value, as best as we can track that, the year built, the lot size, the on-site parking, the developer and the team behind the project, as well as the parking ratio for each project to see whether or not some of these projects are more TOD oriented or if they're more vehicular oriented. So from our project baseline, this is the development map of the projects we're tracking so far. As you can see, along the corridor, existing development is weighted pretty heavily on the downtown St. Petersburg portion of the corridor. Understandably so, the land use right now is more conducive to real estate development on that side of the corridor. So you can see in the zoomed in version of downtown St. Petersburg, the existing development is primarily around there, and then you've got some minor activity in the commercial centers and along the beaches in some of those commercial districts. Understanding that along the western St. Petersburg portion of the district, some of the land use is primarily bound by single-family zoning that limits some of the development potential of those areas. This tracking project is going to be looking at some of the Sunrunner Rising development recommendations and how those are implemented to see how these development patterns change along the stations on the corridor. So some of our preliminary findings, the projects that are being developed along this corridor range from small townhome projects to very big condominium buildings. As I stated in downtown St. Petersburg, we're seeing a lot of these larger projects. Our baseline tracking, we've established 76 developments along this corridor within a half mile of the downtown and urban denoted stations from the Sunrunner Rising development study and a quarter mile from the village and neighborhood denoted stations. So if you recall from that planning study that was done, it attributes different characteristics to each station depending on the walkability and development potential of those stations. And so we're using some of their guidelines for those stations in this tracking. This baseline is going to be used going forward to measure development trends along the corridor. As I stated, our preliminary tracking indicates the following development activity along the corridor. Residential units in development of over 12,000 units, hotel developments over 2,000 rooms, and over 2 million square feet of commercial space with a total development value of $7.5 billion. I will note that there are several large projects that are somewhat inflating these figures, most notably the redevelopment of the gas plant district in St. Petersburg. So a lot of some of these statistics are from that one project. Some examples of development along the corridor, some of you may be familiar with, is the Orange Station development in the Edge District of St. Petersburg, which is a mixed-use project with office space as well as affordable housing and retail space. Other characteristics of developments include the residences at 400 Central, which is a luxury condominium building under construction in St. Petersburg, and Bayfront Health is planning a cancer center on their campus in downtown St. Petersburg. So I wanted to provide some existing developments going on the corridor so you could get a picture of the diversity and variety of the things that are in the works for the corridor. So some development trends along the corridor. As I stated, right now there's the development activity is heavily weighted to downtown St. Petersburg, and that's primarily because the land use along the corridor is more geared towards redevelopment. But we will be looking at the land use changes that are in the works right now from the city of St. Petersburg around the 22nd Street station and the 32nd Street station, where they're actively looking at adjusting land use around those stations from the Sunrunner Rising redevelopment study. And the redevelopment potential of those stations will be increasing as they move forward with those land use changes. In St. Pete Beach, we're seeing more redevelopment catered towards hospitality, which is understandably so. But we recognize that some of the redevelopment potential of these communities outside of St. Petersburg are going to be catered towards the redevelopment appetite of the communities themselves and whether or not they want further redevelopment of those areas. And so with that, that is our baseline, and I welcome any questions or comments on this preliminary overview, and hope to share future updates in the future.
All right, are there any questions or? Okay, I have one.
Sure.
Have you done an overlay over the current like baseline development with what we expected to see from the study itself?
So primarily, we are looking at active development right now. As far as, so the Sunrunner Rising study did have development potential around some of those station areas, but that a lot of that development potential was post land use changes around those stations. And so those land use changes that were recommended in that have not been implemented at any of the station areas yet. St. Petersburg is currently discussing land use changes around the 22nd Street stations and 32nd Street. So those are the first two that they're going to be looking at to make those changes. But as far as an overview, because those land use changes haven't been implemented, it would be difficult to track kind of what the study saw to what is actually happening, if that makes sense.
It does. Assuming those changes come down the pike there, it would be interesting to see if, it's also a way of validating the study, to see if that information that we were thinking is what occurs when you actually put the.
And a lot of that has to do with whether or not the city of St. Petersburg and some of the other municipal partners do implement, to the extent that the study recommended.
Right.
So in St. Petersburg, at the two stations, they're looking at the land use changes that they're recommending aren't necessarily as intense as the study recommended. And so balancing some of that is going to be interesting to see how that impacts some of the development potential.
You'll have to grade on the curve. I
Yeah.
Okay, any additional questions, comments, thoughts?
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Anthony and Jacob, for working on this. I think, to Chair Schulman's point, there were two reasons that we hired St. Pete Rising to help us do this. One is to kind of follow up on the St. Pete Rising study, Sunrunner Rising study that we did, that we got a grant for, and then now we've kind of handed off to the city of St. Petersburg to start. But it looked at ways in which we can capitalize on the $45 million investment of Sunrunner to incentivize development, transit-oriented development along the corridor, and to see if it was successful or not. Number two is, of course, as Anthony has described, establish a baseline, and then to take full credit for every development in St. Petersburg that was caused only because of the Sunrunner.
That's a good one.
I'm going to take that credit. Anthony will probably tell me that's not true, and then then we can have a debate. Yeah.
I will add one final point. As the Sunrunner has been operational now for quite some time, and in the real estate industry, along Central Avenue and some of the parcels that are available for sale and some of the property, the Sunrunner is becoming an amenity that we're seeing some of these real estate brokers describe as an attractive amenity for these parcels. So if you look at property that's for sale along the corridor, you will often see in these brokerage packages that they are now listing the Sunrunner as serving this parcel. And that's something that, as someone who looks at real estate throughout the city, we don't see that necessarily happening with other transit lines in Pinellas. So it is notable that the Sunrunner is being treated as a more high-quality transit service along the corridor than the other routes.
Well, certainly, because those larger
Premium.
buildings downtown, the parking typically is on the bottom and then the units are above. So I don't have to move my car. I can just walk out, catch the Sunrunner, go wherever I need to go, and then come on back up, or walk. And so it certainly is an amenity. And for me, I know that's what I've been looking at all along, how getting those cars off the road so that people who are actually coming into, if they're driving, they can actually park or whatever, so.
So along that same point, though, that I found interesting when I look at the commercial spaces, there's the listings don't only just say for the ones that are on the Sunrunner, it'll say only half a mile north of the Sunrunner, right? Like, so it's reaching further north and south and saying you can, you're here, we still connect to the Sunrunner, we're still cool, like, it's okay. So that's been interesting too. 'Cause
And so we
it's-
will be tracking projects just off the corridor as well. So it's a half mile from the downtown and urban stations, and then a quarter mile from the neighborhood and the village type stations. And so those are the projects that are not exactly directly on Central. We will be looking at those as well.
And how interesting it is that a simple name difference makes a difference. Because we refer to the Sunrunner as the Sunrunner or the trolley as a trolley. And then the bus service that's not Sunrunner or trolley is public transportation, which gives a whole different connotation to some people. But it's all public transportation, so. But we are taking credit, because we are taking credit for the expansion of, these 21-story buildings in downtown.
Absolutely. All right, any additional questions, comments? No? Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Great
Sorry I missed the first part of the presentation, but thank you. I have to leave in 4 minutes. Sorry, 8 minutes, because that clock's fast. Debbie, if you want to do your,
I could do it if
or we can hold for another time.
it's up, you could hold to the board meeting, I don't know if this was.
Well,
It's just, it's an informational.
The
item, so it's not-
reason I have
it's
it,
a-
as you,
a
as
speed
those of you who've been on the
Speed
PSA
sit.
board,
I don't know where the
when the
Yeah,
final
but-
vote on September 27th with
they
public
work
comment and
out
everything on the budget, the
Yeah.
vote is on the
Gives you-
operating budget of 113 million, and then it is also on the 2024 portion of our capital program of 70-something million, and then I think the chair's script says something like 200 million. And I've always thought that was a little bit misleading, because especially with PSTA, and I think it's with all government, capital revenues, the revenues that fund the capital are completely separate
From operations.
than operational revenues.
Yeah, you can't.
And that's essentially the crux of her presentation. Go.
You're on.
No pressure, no pressure.
6 minutes.
No pressure.
It's just the truth.
Okay, just to kind of give you an idea, because when we talk about the operating budget, which we've spent a lot of time doing, there's a lot of work and time that goes into the capital plan, capital improvement plan. And ours here at PSTA spans 5 years. Some agencies do 3, we like 5. And the reason I like 5 is that I can go out and look ahead and see what do we need to do, because it works into things for normal replacements like buses, state of good repair on our facilities. It also looks at new initiatives. It took us many years to get the funding all in place for Sunrunner, to get it in place for the Clearwater Transit Center. It's a working document. Literally, these days, it's every day, and today, our budget manager said, pencils down, everybody. But we update it annually because things do change. It is a large budget, I think as Brad had mentioned, $187.5 million over the next 5 years. The majority of that relates to normal replacement of our buses and facilities as far as state of good repair. The fiscal year '24 budget is $72.5 or $0.6 million. And what's interesting is 92% of our budget for next year is funded by other people's money. Now, we like to make a wise investment when we look at other funding sources. So we do have within here some capital reserve funding. We use it very strategically, and my goal is to always try to find some other funding that could substitute for it where it makes sense. We have a number of major projects next year. We'll be taking receipt of some zero-emission buses in next year, working on the electric infrastructure for it, moving forward on the Clearwater Transit Center, and also doing some roof rehab and solar panels. Now, we've also gone ahead, and you've seen just in, I think it was last month, that Al and Raj did a great presentation walking everybody through some technology projects that we have here. We also have as a new initiative in next year's budget is what we've been talking about is the Sunrunner new station based on the savings that we had from the project. it's important to me, so that's what we're doing next year, but I'm always looking way ahead. So I want to focus on the future, and I want to see what we need to do, when we need to do it. We've got studies going on that may give us some really good ideas and projects to move forward on with new transit corridors. I want to be prepared for competitive grant opportunities. I don't want to be thinking, what am I going to do? I know what we're going to do, and I can go for it. An example of a state of good repair that's a priority is our buses. I know in 2028, I'm going to need to order another 15 buses. When I talk about saving for that opportunity, I'm starting to set aside some grant money for that. I'm also looking at competitive grant opportunities like the Lono require a local match so that when we get there, we're not scrambling to do anything. And I guess my question in my mind is, are we doing a good enough job? Are we really saving for the future? We know we have to. We've got within the 5-year plan about $17.5 million of capital reserves funds at this point in time to make all these state of good repair, normal replacements happen. And I would love to see that grow so that we can be ready on a competitive side to be able to move forward. So as I mentioned, my job is to make sure if I can find a good funding source that can substitute for capital reserves, that's money that I can set aside that when we get a notice of opportunity from some funding agency, we can react instantly because I have to attest to the fact that we have the money. So why is it important? Because this capital improvement plan helps us to plan for the future. Any questions?
I thought the Jetsons car was red, not green.
Well, and you know what I was thinking? I pulled that out of my head as something fun. And you know, I thought of you because on T-BARTA, one of the things that we have looked at over the years I've been on T-BARTA are these little flying things that go off rooftop to rooftop.
They're doing it in South Florida.
Yeah.
They have
Are
one
we
in South
accounting for
Florida.
that in the Intermodal Center?
Could be.
And that's right to City Hall.
Oh,
Yes, yes.
But all those things we saw as children are coming true.
Yeah, yeah. Brad, I do agree with you. A clear distinction needs to be made between capital projects. Every other board that I serve on, to include serving on county commission, we distinguish in our budget the difference between capital improvement project fundings and the reserves there versus what we have for our operations or our general fund, because people always, when you start putting those numbers out there, then they just see it all together, and it's like, well, you have money, why are you increasing this? Well, yeah, I have money, but if I got a grant, I have to spend that money on this. Or for this category, I have to spend this money here. I can't mix streams. You know, there are opportunities where maybe we can pull money from reserves to pay for something, because like what we did with the Gladys Douglas property with the county, we pulled money from reserves. We did that because we applied for a grant specifically from the Historic Preservation Department. We got our $3.5 million back. We put the money back in. So it was an arm's length transaction. But sometimes you don't have a chance to go through all of that, so people understand that. So I think making the clear delineation of the funding streams is really good, and explaining, yes, this is what we have, this is what it's designated for. And like what you just said, if I'm applying, I've got a sign saying I'm attesting that we have the dollars, or I'm attesting that we have the match. And if we spend down these dollars, I don't have the money, I don't have the match.
And you don't ever want to go back to the funding agency.
I ain't going to
and say
jail
that.
either, because I like wearing my regular clothes.
At the track riders committee last night, after Heather gave the presentation on the route changes, one of the customers said, well, he was very upset that we had spent $4 million on computers, the vote last month on upgrading, because they're not being supported, the old ones we have. He said, why couldn't you spend the $4 million to not cut the routes? Then we have to try to explain. They're different sources. It's very difficult for people to understand that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate, yes, Whitney, we are one, you know.
I know, I apologize. I just wanted to ask for a point of clarification on, Ms. Flowers, your motion earlier, to make sure that the staff and everyone is prepared for the presentation that you requested and the information discuss before the board meeting.
Are we talking about for the 50-cent fare?
Yeah.
Okay, so my
Just make
motion.
sure I got it right.
That's okay. My motion is that a presentation be made by administration relative to the decision, the request to provide for a fair opportunity for for those riders running to the St. Pete Beach area. Number two, the potential and possibility of moving to payment for full fare prior to November 1. Number three, reduction of St. Pete Beach service for the Sunrunner altogether. I also requested that staff reach out and invite the sheriff or his designee to make a presentation before the full board regarding the perception of increased crime due to the unhoused sleeping on the beach and utilizing the free Sunrunner service. And
St. Pete Beach officials.
inviting St. Pete Beach, city administrator and/or council members. The reason I'm saying and/or council members is because of the noticing, because if they have to take an action, it's gotta be,
Sure.
sunshine, so.
Thank you for making sure. I always want to make sure we got that.
Yeah, I had to remember all that.
I know, I
Lord Jesus.
apologize.
They might not have enough days to do that.
Yeah, they may not, but that's why I was saying the administrator, because the administrator could come,
just a
and that's why I say
representative.
and/or, yeah.
Thank you.
Yo, no problem.
I think you got that word for word from the original motion.
Good memory, yeah.
All right, and
I was pulling it out the air.
is there any other business?
Move adjourn?
The only other final thing I have is I'm just shocked that we went through 2 meetings. I didn't hear from Al the whole time. I don't know what's happening.
You're highly motivated.
You're highly motivated.
Listen, I
to
bet
stay
today he was
silent.
glad he didn't have
Okay,
anything.
all right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Lay-by officially closed.
Oh, boy, good
Is it called the Largo Transit Stop? or-
No, it's where our buses come in and lay over.
Give me a
Okay,
minute.
yeah, what is the exact address